I just watched what is probably one of my favorite horror films ever made, and the reason I'm loving Hereditary so much is because it leaves us with so many questions. And one of my favorite questions that I've been hearing a lot of people ask is, was the family actually crazy? Mainly looking at Peter and Annie. Some people are making the claims that the entire film was simply inside the minds of the both of them, how they are both suffering from hereditary mental illnesses, and that the only person that can look at them objectively is Steve, as he is married into the family and suffers from none of this. But I'm gonna go ahead and say that that theory is wrong, that neither one of them suffered from any mental illness. And hear me out. Annie describes her family history of mental illness at the beginning of the film, how her mother was insane and her dad starved himself to death, and how her brother hung himself as he was a schizophrenic. Yet what was actually happening is that the grandmother was a leader of a cult that worshipped Paimon, a king who possessed a lot of supernatural powers, like knowing past and future events, the ability to make spirits appear, creating visions, being able to summon servant spirits, as well as reanimating the dead. The grandmother could pass the demon soul of the king onto her son, aka Annie's brother, but Annie's brother decided to take his own life before Paimon could even take control of his body, which is why Annie's brother claimed that the grandmother was trying to put voices into his head. And with this failed attempt, the next step for the grandmother was to use her daughter's newborn son. In a vision most likely projected by Paimon, we learn that Annie went through a lot when carrying Peter. Annie claims that she didn't want to have him and tried several times to abort him, but the grandmother had a good amount of influence in the situation and made sure that she went through with having the kid, which caused them to stop talking after some of their disputes. So because of Annie's broken relationship with her mother, the grandmother was kept far away from Peter. And because of this, the grandmother had to pass the spirit of Paimon onto Charlie, which is why she wouldn't let go of her when she was an infant. Annie even claims that it got so bad that every time she tried to feed Charlie, the grandmother would take over and want to feed Charlie herself. The fact that she placed Paimon in Charlie is why Charlie made the claim that the grandmother always wanted Charlie to be a boy, but still said Charlie was her favorite. This is because Paimon was present within Charlie, but couldn't take control of a female body. It needed a male host, and this is why some of the attendants slash cult followers at the grandmother's funeral were smiling at Charlie. As I mentioned earlier, one of the powers Paimon possesses is having the knowledge of past and future events. The terrifying naked cult followers that we see at the end were real people, as we saw them at the beginning of the film at the funeral. They must have been operating during this film as well, having some influence on Charlie's death, as they could receive knowledge from Paimon, as he could see into future events, telling his followers to place a dead animal in the road at the right time in the right place, making it so Peter would drift off the road, thus killing Charlie and unleashing the spirit of Paimon, but also making it so Peter would be more susceptible to Paimon, as the death of Charlie would break him and make him more vulnerable. And that was the main point. There were no hereditary illnesses passed down through their family, but everything that could be described as a mental illness was in fact supernatural and was just a way to break down the family to possess them. Most of the conflict in this film was from miscommunication between the family members. Annie used to sleepwalk, which was most likely her getting possessed by Paimon or some other demon spirits, something that was just not in her control. She reflects on the time where she was standing over her children that she covered in paint thinner from head to toe, with a lit match in her hand. And you can see that she was fighting to explain herself, that she didn't have any control or awareness of the situation. Yet because of this, Peter never trusted her or felt comfortable talking to her. And since they had a messed up relationship, the communication and trust between the two was just thrown out the window, making it so Peter has to lie to her, mainly looking at the scene where Peter was trying to borrow the car to go out. Instead of saying he's gonna go to a normal high school party where there was drinking, the conversation between them is absolute warfare. During their back and forth, Peter claims that he's going to a school barbecue, which made Annie force Peter to take his sister. But if Peter felt more comfortable with his mom to explain to her the truth, she wouldn't have let Charlie go to a party like that. But she did, eventually causing the death of Charlie. And the spirit of Paimon was brought into the house through Charlie's notebook, giving him the ability to wreak havoc on the family for the rest of the film. From Charlie's death onward, everything happening to Annie wasn't because of any mental illness, but because of the dark events happening to her. She has an extremely messed up past, to the point where she couldn't even get upset that her own mother was dead. Her brother killed herself, her father died of starvation, and her son hates her because she unintentionally almost set him on fire. Her only only daughter was accidentally decapitated by her son, she found a way to communicate with her through a notebook, only to find out that it's actually a demon, drawing her son with X's on his eyes as it's trying to possess him. So Annie is just really not having a good week. Mostly everything that she says and does throughout the film is kind of justified. Like anyone, she is just slowly losing her mind because of the events unfolding. She was not trying to worry her husband earlier in the film by saying that she was going to the movies, when in truth, she was going to a support group, which then led Steve to be suspicious of her. We also see earlier in the film that Steve gets a call from the burial service. He's told that the grandmother's grave was dug up, which was Paimon, as one of his abilities was reanimating the dead. But when Annie asks what the call was about, Steve lies to her and claims that it was just billing stuff. If Steve told Annie the truth and not cared as much about worrying her, they could have talked about it right then and there. And if Annie told Steve the truth about going to seek emotional support, it could have added so much clarity to their situation. All of this would lower Steve's suspicions and he wouldn't come to the conclusion that she was lying, which made Annie's confession about Steve being the love of her life so much more tragic. She is finally telling him the truth, saying exactly what she needs to save their son, but Steve blames Annie for the grave digging and says that she needs help. She throws the book into the fire in a desperate attempt to end all of this, but her husband then bursts into flames. This moment breaks her enough where she can then be possessed. And a similar situation happens with Peter. Since Charlie's death, Peter is so mentally worn out. When he is consistently tortured throughout the last half of the film, he cries and sobs like a little kid, and later refers to his mother as mommy, really showing how much these supernatural events are breaking him down. And this would overall make it easier for Paimon to possess Peter. It would have been successful through their means of torture, but this process was definitely sped up when Peter jumped out the window, and Paimon's spirit saw the best opportunity to take control of his body. Peter and Annie were psychologically tormented to the point where they can be manipulated by a supernatural being. There were no mental illnesses and they weren't crazy. It was just demons. And those are all my thoughts on that question. Like I said, I love Hereditary, so I'm gonna do more explanation videos just like this one. So if you guys love horror and sci-fi, please subscribe to support this channel. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next Hereditary Explained video.